All in the Same Gang by the West Coast All Stars. Um, Easy E, the late Easy E, and everybody else in between from the 90s. Tone Loc, Young MC. That was my era. I remember when that song dropped. I was not really a big fan of that song. I thought it was hella hypocritical. I thought many of the artists in that um, song, All in the Same Gang, were agents of the state. I do not think that the gangster rappers are responsible for mass incarceration and the drug wars, but they were assets. They were tools to pass a lot of very regressive and harmful legislation. They were what is called propagandists or Pied Pipers for mass incarceration. Living in the Midwest at the time, I knew that this music influenced a lot of people, not just the fans of hip hop, but legislators and judges and prosecutors and police officers. Um, is as KRS-One had said, they're not looking at you. That they're looking. They're not looking at me. They're looking at you. When I say these lyrics, you got to live with the repercussions. But anyway, I thought it was hella hypocritical. I appreciated the message in the song, but I thought it was an insincere, knee jerk thing. It was reactionary as hell because those artists were still promoting and profiting from the very behaviors and the very lyrical themes that they were rapping against in that song. And prior to that, I played Self Destruction, which predates All in the Same Game. It was basically an East Coast, West Coast type divergence. So All in the Same Gang was a, would you say, mockery, a bastardization of self destruction. I don't know. But anyway, KRS-One had the Stop the Violence movement going on even before Self Destruction. He had a song on his second LP called Stop the Violence. Stop the violence, 1, 2, 3, if you want to go to the tip top. Stop the violence in hip hop. Why? So KRS-One had been promoting anti-violence themes since his second LP. Of course, his first LP, Criminal Minded, was a people said that it was a contradiction. But anyway, I saw that KRS-One made a turn after Scott LaRock was shot and killed, and he had a consistent, at least in his music, as far as his lifestyle, that's another thing. But at least in his music, after Scott LaRock was killed during the making of uh, By Any Means Necessary, he was consistently anti-violence, anti-gangsterism, pro, upliftment of Africa. Whereas many of these artists who claim that they made a turn right back to making what was called gangster rap, and but in gangster rap is anti-African propaganda. Um, a lot of times, if you look at the parallels between the themes of gangster rap and you go and look at Goebbels in Nazi Germany, you look at Nazi Germany anti-Jewish propaganda, and I'm not making this up. You go and look up a German documentary with there are some with English subtitles for those of us who don't speak German, called The Eternal Jew. You go up and look up this documentary called The Eternal Jew. And in The Eternal Jew is basically a Nazi produced documentary of Jewish lifestyle, Jewish culture, and Jewish impact on the German society. And they argued that German society was being corrupted and degraded by Jews, not just Jewish presence, but Jewish mainly culture, Jewish music, Jewish fashion, Jewish social and interpersonal relationships. They state that Jewish men had some type of fetish for good German Aryan women. They also stated that Jews were key in distributing drugs and promoting the use of drugs, mainly marijuana. They said that Jewish music would evoke degenerate thoughts and would corrupt the morals of good Aryans. Look it up. Everything that was said about hip hop in the 90s. There was an article written, Newsweek, way back, 90, maybe 93, 94, 1993, where there was a mainstream article produced talking about how urban hip hop was corrupting suburban white youth and driving the corruption of suburban white youth. And Hitler had entire art exhibits talking about degenerate Jewish art. And you cannot find one negative accusation or one negative stereotype that was in the German anti-Jewish propaganda that was not leveled against African people, the entirety of the African population in the United States, and that was not promoted enthusiastically by most gangster rappers. And I'm not making this up. Go look up The Eternal Jew. And then go back and review gangster hip hop from dating back to the late 80s up till right now today. And even the Jews were also castigated for bringing Negro jazz, for playing, promoting, and importing black jazz from the West into Aryan society. So we were even blamed for that. And there were some African people for personal enrichment who deliberately, consciously, and unrelentlessly participated in this dehumanizing process of criminalizing and pathologizing. That was another thing Hitler was very big on, talking about infestation of Jews, where Trump is talking about infestation, was talking about being spread of disease. The Jews spread syphilis, gonorrhea, and other sexually transmitted diseases throughout German society. And now you cannot find a billboard for antiviral medications, a commercial. I say they all have black people and people of color in them. For decades, we run around this society talking about how black people are not represented, how people of color in general are not represented in the media. But one place we don't have to protest for representation for AIDS and HIV. They painted HIV with a black brush. They've turned it into a black disease. I might have to reach out to Brother Kidi Obiawadu and bring him back on the show to talk about AIDS and HIV. Or maybe y'all should go to Brother Kidi Obiawadu. He has a YouTube page. He still has Living in Black, LIB Radio, Lib Radio. You know, I would like to bring him here, but I do think Brother Kidi deserves more of our support. I mean, that brother has a lot of, but, you know, shout out to Kidi Obiawadu, the Conscious Rasta, and LIB Radio. Check him out. And I'll start doing more to share his content, too. We can all make our contributions. But anyway, a black gangster rapper is a race traitor. That's what I'm coming up to. I don't think that the popularity of gangster rap was natural. The spread of gangster rap was not natural. It was not based on our enjoyment of the music or the quality of the music juxtaposed to what was standard hip hop. Standard hip hop was a call and response, African ritual. Standard hip hop was about to the hippie that don't stop, the bang dang boogie the beat. It was about party. MCing means masters of ceremony. The MC was the person who got the party hype, who would get people going, who would do chants, call response, rhymes. And then as they started making more formal songs, it was infused with the politics. It was infused with storytelling. And some of those stories included, some of the hardships, going astray, crack killed, Applejack, he jumped in and he couldn't jump back. They talk about the drug, food stamp struggles. And they would even talk about pimps, gangsters, thugs, because that was the reality. But talking about something versus promoting something, talking about something versus claiming to be something, those aren't the same thing. I can come on the air, as if Monday show, I talked about gangs and gangbangers. But what is your perspective? What is your point of view? What context are you speaking about these things? I'm not even saying you can't talk about the horrors or the realities of street life. But that's not the totality of what the streets were and what the streets are today. In my own housing project that was labeled a gang territory, that was labeled a bad neighborhood, that was labeled a violent neighborhood, 90% of the people that lived in that community engaged in no antisocial, no criminal, no violent, no organized crimes, did not consume or distribute drugs. But we were under siege. In a community of 1,200 people, you can take a dozen people, 1%, and totally transform the face of that community if those people are willing to engage in armed criminal activities, organized, coordinated armed criminal activities. And the members of that community, number one, are not equipped or empowered to defend themselves. And number two, those who have the authority and the equipment to defend and fight for them refuse to do so. In Chicago right now, in Missouri when I was growing up, in the 90s when I was in college in New York City, the police had a policy of containment. They knew certain crimes, from homicide to rape to trafficking, would go on. And the drug dealers and the gangbangers and the serial rapists all understood, if I keep my activities to behind certain invisible lines, I can pretty much operate with impunity. But if I cross a certain lines, they will bring all resources to bear. 70% of the homicides in Chicago don't get solved. But some B-list celebrity allegedly commits a crime downtown, and they dedicate half the damn police force to solving this crime that they allege never even happened. So you're better off committing a real crime in my community than committing a fake crime in the white community. They will put more resources behind a lie, uncovering an alleged fake crime in the white community than they would put behind solving or bringing to justice a massacre in my community. So when you understand that we're in such a system and we're marked by such a system, and you enrich yourself by validating those lies, you enrich yourself by becoming a living embodiment of that stereotype. You had rappers back in the 90s literally said, I get on stage, I get paid to grab my nuts. You know, like Ice Cube literally said something to that effect. I don't remember the lyric exactly, but he literally said, I get on stage, I get paid to get on stage and act like a subhuman species. And this is a guy who had to drop out of college to go on tour to be a gangster. And you see his quote unquote business acumen. You know, the scariest black man in the world, America's Most Wanted. Now he's sitting on Jimmy Kimmel on couches across from people like Jimmy Kimmel and these other, white nightly talk show, just chatting it up like, hey, old boy, missed you at the country club last week. And there are literally thousands of black men dead and many tens of thousands of more incarcerated that were fueled, that were fed into a system that was validated. This super predator concept. We're so mad at Hillary Clinton. When Clinton was running against Trump, they went and got that tape of her sitting there saying there is a special type of criminal. We're not just talking about someone who shoplifts. We're not just talking about someone who commits a crime of passion, about someone who just went astray in life. She said there are a certain class of criminal out there that is a super predator that does crime for the sake of doing crime. And we were outraged. I was outraged. How dare she call black people super predators? And we were outraged. And many black folks said, I will never vote for Hillary Clinton. And some other less principled black people say, I'll vote for Hillary Clinton, but I'll never forgive her for that. But at the same time, we express outrage at Hillary Clinton for saying some black people are super predators. Many black artists who embodied the super predator narrative, who promoted it, who wanted to sell the idea that there was a classification of a black people with a crime record like Charles Manson. It's hard not to kill niggas. It's like a full-time job not to kill niggas. Killing niggas is like breathing. One less nigga I gotta worry about. These are all lyrics from songs that were sold to children. And we celebrate those people. Jay-Z's a billionaire. And he's somehow somebody we're celebrating. How you mad at somebody from outside your community for saying something despicable, for dehumanizing our people, but we don't get mad at our own for dehumanizing us? We got higher standards and higher expectations for people outside our race than we do for people within our race? So, anyway, let's just stay on. Because I want to talk about, and this is all related, because I think I need to talk about this because I see some emerging trends within the black community that are not only disturbing, they're doubly disturbing because there are a lot of black people who are promoting these trends as pro-black, as positive. When we look at the core of these emerging trends, and I know there's a lot to talk about, but there's only so much time in one day, and there's only so much time I'm allotted to broadcast on the air. So I have to triage. I have to prioritize which tragedies I'm going to talk about. And sometimes I want to talk about the atrocities and the tragedies. Sometimes I want to talk about what can be done about the atrocities and tragedies. Sometimes I need to talk about why we are incapable of even recognizing or effectively organizing to speak to solve, to reverse the atrocities and tragedies. Now I'm doing the best I can. So let's get going. And let's stay on topic. Let's try to avoid any rabbit holes and digressions. This show topic is reactionary violence versus revolutionary violence. I talked about the history of gangs and how it is a myth that the gangs started off as these positive forces in the community. This mythology that the Crips stood for community revolution and progress, and that the Blood stood for brotherly love overcomes oppression and domination. That these street tribes, as many of the reactionary forces in our community call gangs, street tribes or street organizations, trying to rebrand gangs. As we got people like Killer Cholesterol Mike trying to get gangs to capitalize on their popularity. He literally goes to the gangs and say, our children look up to you. They love this crap. They eat up this crap of being a gangster, of being a capitalist, of being violent and murderous, lawless. They love it. They think it's cool. And you can sell these kids toxic products like Coca-Cola. You can sell them toxic clothing, sweatshop. You can use your popularity like the gangster rappers do. Because the gangster rappers are making billions of dollars of being fake gangsters. So why don't the real gangsters capitalize off the gangster persona like the fake gangsters do? And this is supposed to be a positive win. So not only are you selling crack to our children, why not flip that crack money and sell them sugar, legal crack, refined processed sugar? And that's looked at as positive. They broadcast this kind of anti-African propaganda on Netflix. And I have people arguing with me about how great this is. That Killer Cholesterol Mike is going to turn gangsters into capitalists. And I told them, gangsters are already capitalists. I asked them, tell me one value, one methodology, one goal or agenda that gangs have that is contrary to what capitalists do. Gangsters are capitalists and capitalists are gangsters. So you don't need to try to convince or teach or promote capitalism to gangsters. They're already doing capitalism. And so, if you listen to Monday's show, I said we need to stop trying to rebrand gangs and accept them for what they are. As Chuck D said, every brother ain't a brother. I talked about the history since the first black African people first came under colonization, which was followed by slavery, chattel slavery. There have always been blacks who within that system of oppression have, as opposed to either trying to resist oppression, you have three stages or three statuses under oppression. You have people who resist it, you have people who submit to it, and you have people who cooperate with it. Many people who submit, they don't support it, they don't agree with it, but they don't have the wherewithal to fight against it. So they go along to get along. They try to maneuver through the system and gains whatever benefits or rewards they can get from the system and avoid or circumvent any penalties or hardships imposed by the system. They get by. They striving and surviving. But then you have other black people who not only live under oppression without without resisting it, they begin to try to share the benefits. They internalize the value system of the oppressor. They begin to not only desire the things of the oppressor, which we all do, nice cars and blah, blah, blah. Well, most of us do, not all. Too many of us do. But they begin to say, hey, I'm worthy of this. I want this. Not only do I want it, I deserve it, and I'm going to do whatever I can to do it. Get it. And if you're a black capitalist, one thing you have to do is find a vulnerable population to exploit. There is no capitalist that did not exploit a vulnerable population. So you have the people who resist. We're pretty familiar with them. These are the people we elevate as heroes. We pretend that we want to be like. We drag them out every February and put placards of them up on walls. So we're pretty good at knowing who the resistors are. Most of us fall into the category of people who submit to oppression, but we like to see ourselves as people who resist it. And then you have the predators, the people who cooperate with the system. And it goes all the way back to colonial Africa, all the way back to plantation America, where black people who were under oppression but chose to prey upon other black people who were under oppression. My great-grandfather, he submitted. He accepted Jesus Christ as his Lord and Savior. He labored on. He loved his family, starting with his wife and his children, my grandmother, and his great-grandchildren, and all the way up to the time where he was teaching me to prime an engine, how to repair and mend fences, how to plant food. He did all he could to teach me from what he thought how to live a good life, live a decent life, and be a good person. And he lived through everything from the Great Depression to the Civil Rights Movement. He didn't engage. He said, I'm going to focus on, even though I have no education, I got to go work these rail yards. He had his hand was deformed and had fingers severed from his hand because he worked in hard industry. And even with half a hand, he was still out there banging away at it. And even though he wasn't going to go fight the man, he wasn't going to go burn nothing down in the riots, he wasn't about to go over there with the crazy Muslims and Malcolm X. He wasn't about to go and waste his time running up and down the street getting spat on by Dr. King. He was going to be a pillar in his community. People in the community can come to him if they need materials, if they need aid, if they need instruction, hell, if they need some level of protection. He decided, I'm going to just obey the law, submit to the system, and get by, raise up my children, send them off to college, send them off to strive and do better than I did. He represented what's called the black masses, the common black man. And he would never dream of pimping a hoe, slinging a rock, busting his gat at the next nigga. None of those things were alien concepts. Like, but black folks don't behave that way. That's Bugsy Siegel. That's Al Capone. That's the mafia type stuff. Black people don't conduct ourselves that way. That's what I mean when I talk about the black masses. There were black men that came before him, and there are many black men that came after him like that. And those were the masses, the vast majority of African people. I can't say it's whether it's worthy of celebration or worthy of condemnation. I won't call it, but it's worthy of study and understanding. Because in that population also represented the pool of people that we could extract from to revolutionize and radicalize. My great-grandfather represented the pool of people that Garvey, Black Panther Party, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and all of the progressive movements had to draw from that population. And they had to put on overalls and work boots and walk to the rail yards where my grandfather was working. Had to go into the mills, had to go out to the farmland. That's why you see a lot of pictures of Stokely Carmichael before he became Kwame Ture. He's wearing overalls and work boots. He looks like an agricultural worker because that's the people population he would have to go into and say, hey, you can do more than just survive. It's bigger than just feeding your kids. You have a right. You come from a race of people who governed, who created policies, who oversaw economies, and who cultivated and preserved ecosystems. You can do more than just live under some oppressive psychopath's domination. And when we would get enough of those people like my great-grandfather to see that, to expand their understanding, even go to them and tell them Jesus didn't just submit to the state. Jesus was a revolutionary. Jesus was executed by the government. Those were the people. Because if you understand the analysis, that was called, in a Marxian lexicon, they were the proletariat. And they said that the proletariat represented the highest potential revolutionary force, the proletariat, because they had the skills, they had the fundamental value systems for revolution. They cared for other people. They were willing to make sacrifices and make positive contributions to other people. They produced, they utilized, even though they didn't own the means of production, they were the source of wealth production. They had all the elements necessary. If you could simply radicalize them through giving them a class analysis to show them that the people who ruled over them were not worthy to rule over them. If you could demonstrate that, you could radicalize, revolutionize these people, and you can have them going from proletariat to being vanguard revolutionaries. But there was another population, which is called, let's just go with this stream, but there's several names. Carlos Cooks, the man who took over after Marcus Garvey, who was essentially erased from the history books. The black atheists that took over the UNIA after Garvey was put into exile, which they will erase. Go read Carlos Cooks and Black Nationalism. And you'll see why they tried to erase Carlos Cooks from our history. But Carlos Cooks called them caste Negroes. And by caste Negroes mean fixed, locked in, Negroes that you just couldn't reach. And these were the predatory blacks. And they've taken many forms. They were called headmen during the plantation days. you know, the coon, the Sambos, the ones that would, sell out the whole community for extra rations. Those who committed what Dr. Claude Anderson said, meritorious manumission. Africans that won their freedom not by resisting the system, but cooperating and serving the system at a higher level. Any slave that snitched on a rebellion, any slave that saved a white man's life or property, any slave that preserved a white man's life and property will receive his own limited level of property. That would be called meritorious manumission. You would win your freedom by giving high levels of service to the master's oppressive enslavement system, which is what we're dealing with right now today. Those slaves were seen as having no revolutionary potential. You cannot recruit the house slaves, the head slaves. The head slaves were the slaves that rode or ride around on horses. Because the white man said, I got this plantation. I can go get some white boys, some poor white trash, and have them ride and be, oversee my other slaves, but I got to pay them. Why don't I get some strong buck slave and give them a weapon, give them a whip, and give them a slight bit more authority over the other slaves and have him do it for free? The whole point of slavery is not having paid labor. So slaves would do all the jobs they could possibly do. The last thing a plantation owner wanted to do was hire paid labor. And the only paid labor was white labor. And there's a book on this situation called Masterless Men. The Masterless Men. That talk about just the deplorable conditions of white people in the antebellum South during chattel slavery. Because they couldn't get jobs. They took their jobs. And even though they lived in the most despicable conditions, many of the enslaved Africans ate better and lived in better conditions than the average non-slave owning white person. The white people still took up arms to defend that system because they are bat guano insane. But that's a whole nother discussion. I don't want to get off track. And so these slaves were told, you can't recruit these slaves. You can't bring them into the slave rebellion. Back in 1819, they didn't recruit them for slave rebellions. In 1919, Garvey and later Carlos Cook said, we can't bring these slaves. These same buck, they are still with us today, forming the same thing. If I serve this system at a high level, I can get all the material rewards this system has to offer. I'll never have as much power as master, but I'll have more power than the average Negro. I'll have more money than the average black. And that's good enough for me. Those blacks are called the caste, like Carlos Cook, but in a Marxist lexicon, they call them the lumpen. And he says that the lumpen has no revolutionary potential because they don't have the essential value system, the basic value systems and social connections that are required to radicalize. There is no fertile soil there. And in order for a lumpen to become a revolutionary, a lumpen would first have to become a proletariat, and then the proletariat would have to. But you can't jump from lumpen to revolutionary. You can't revolutionize gangs. You can't revolutionize gangsters. You have to humanize gangs. You have to humanize gangsters and then revolutionize. And many of our people, or most of our people, are already human and humane, and then they can be revolutionized. And people get mad at me because we have this mythology that these gangs are somehow dormant military forces, that these gangs are somehow going to be our front line of defense against if there's this race war that y'all imagine is coming, that's been here for 200 years, but y'all looking down the road for something that's already in your house. Y'all imagine the gangs are going to stand up for black people. The gangs are already armed. They're already ready to shoot and kill. And that when stuff comes down, when the stuff hit the fan, the gangs are going to stand up and defend and encircle our community and defend us. We have an example of how gangs behave when there is a crisis in our community. We have several examples. One of the most recent mass example was the Katrina hurricane. 24 hours before Hurricane Katrina hit Louisiana, there were over 24 freaking homicides. Gangsters letting them weapons go. And that's where the No Limit soldiers came out of Nolia. Cash Money Records. Dudes was getting paid. There was big money, drugs, prostitution, Mardi Gras, party town. The gangs had a lot of money, a lot of clout, and a whole lot of weapons. And they were using those weapons profusely prior to Katrina hitting. And the moment the hurricane hit, the gangs did not stop because there were white people. There are reports coming out even now. White people literally went on a hunt. Blackwater, which is the name back then, it's changed its name, but Blackwater, private mercenary organization, descended on Katrina with no resistance. All the rednecks in the rural Louisiana surrounding who didn't want the blacks to escape would go off and block off all the major exits, the bridges, the highway off-ramps, when black people were trying to escape the floods. And told those black people and turned black people around, pregnant black girls, and told them to take their asses back to the slaughter. Go back to the Superdome. Where were the black gangs? Where were the black gangs? Black people were summarily executed, hunted down, and murdered in cold blood in the lawless streets of Louisiana by white racists, by mercenaries, by white mercenaries. White rednecks would block off our escape routes in Louisiana. Where the hell were these gangs that y'all imagine that when stuff hit the fans, the gangs are going to use their weapons instead of against the community, they're going to turn them on our oppressors? Where it never has happened. The gangs started looting. And at best, they might get themselves and their personal relatives out. At best. If they don't turn on us like rabid dogs. And if the gangs were a potential fighting force, a potential revolutionary force, I'd be the first one to stand up and be like, yo, it is what it is. And I ask people, besides your emotions, besides how you feel, besides your warped beliefs, what evidence do you have that the gangs would ever be an asset to the black community? Anything but a predatory, parasitic extraction organizations against the black community. And y'all keep telling me all this fake, gangs gave out turkeys. I'm like, one of the most charitable men in the history of America was David Rockefeller. Hitler gave to charity. If y'all don't recognize this charity hustle, now I don't know what else to tell you. You're not equipped to even have this discussion if you're that damn stupid. So you want to tell me if you spend you extract literally billions of dollars from the community, but you're going to kick out some turkeys on Christmas and Thanksgiving. And we're like, okay, fair deal. You going to shake on that deal? And so we have Hurricane Katrina. If you need more examples of how gangs behave in times of great crisis, go look at the 68 riots. Who did the gang side with? Here in Chicago. Who did the gang side with? Go look up the history. The federal government said, we can utilize the gangs for a few dollars, for pennies on the dollar. And the gangs were hired by the predatory Jewish slumlords. And the white merchants who were selling us rotten food at overprice. Many of the merchants in the black community in the 60s, they owned several supermarkets or delis. And they would take the expired food from the white delis and take it down to the black community and sell it at a markup. And for more money, you could get fresh food in the white community. And when the riots, when our black people took to the streets and said, hell no, we're not going to take this no more, the gangs went store to store and said, we can protect this store from them crazy niggas. They didn't help us. But because gangsters are on TV, we turn to the Video Music Awards. We turn to MTV. We go to the movies. We go to the sports and go watch a ball chasing on the NBA, and you see the gangster rappers sitting on a courtside seat. They're everywhere. So they must be doing good. They must be doing something right. Yeah, I'm telling you what they're doing. They're doing the same thing the slave that sat up on the horse, the slave that got to sit on master's porch at the plantation house, The slave when you had to go sleep on some straw on a dirt floor, and the slave that got to go sleep on a warm cot in master's basement, or sleep under the dining room table at night. The slave that had all the nice things, all the nice cast-off clothes. Yeah, they doing something right. They're serving the interests of our oppressor. At least the enslaved Africans were not dumb enough to celebrate those slaves who sold out to master, but today we celebrate the sellouts. And it's the same power dynamic. It's the same relationship. They still have us under slavery. They still coercing our labor. They're still extracting from us much more than they give to us. And they still have the power to kill us with impunity. But, you know, they let us party. But wait a minute, they let us party. We would have the concept of dancing the slaves. We would have big revivals, big religious revivals where the Africans would flail and dance around the fire. But this is a kinder, gentler, industrial, modernized, cubicle wage slavery. So we didn't end slavery, but at least we reformed it. Like, yes, many of us are still going to be brutalized, die violent death, be crippled. But if you play your cards right, just like every other slave on every other planet, if you play your cards right, you can derive some level of comfort and avoid the harshest consequences and punishment the system has to level against you if you walk the line. If you don't make no trouble, if you don't stir things up, you don't get tangled up with them rebellious slaves. If you just let the curtain down when Harriet knock at your door, you might make it through and be okay. Or your son might get shot by a pig. It's a gamble. And we've made this bargain. And I'm saying, let's just not be in denial. I'm not even telling you to do anything other than stop lying. Stop deluding yourself. And let's at least be realistic. So, I don't know what more I can say to dispel this myth. Obviously, nobody wants to give this up. Black people, we want to believe that there is some hidden force, that there is some potential, there is some chance that there is black power. Real black power got obliterated through COINTELPRO. We don't have the Black Liberation Army. We don't have the Deacons of Self-Defense. We don't have the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense. We don't even have the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. We don't have the Organization of Afro-American Unity. We don't have the Universal Negro Improvement Association. All of our pro-black, militant, conscious, revolutionary organizations have been obliterated. And instead of taking time to rebuild, to reconstruct, to bring it back stronger, more resilient, what we're going to do is start to develop a fantasy to say, well, what's left? We got the church. They left us our church. They did away with our progressive, revolutionary, and even our integrationists were blown up. And the ones that weren't obliterated were corrupted. So what's left? The black business and entrepreneurial infrastructure is gone because of integration. It used to be if you were a very capable black entrepreneur, all of your reinvestment went back to the hood. Even when you wanted to vacation, you went from hood to hood. I'm a prominent black businessman in Oklahoma, and I'm going to go to Strivers Row in Harlem. I'm going to go out to Sag Harbor to the black beaches. So even the wealthy blacks had to hop from black to black. So even if you were a businessman, you were still well entrenched and well embedded in the neighborhood. And wasn't no white folk gonna work for you, so you had to hire black folks to work for you. Because even no matter how prominent or how great of a black businessman you were, no matter how many millions of dollars as a black businessman you had prior to integration, wasn't no white folks gonna take no orders from you. So our black businesses, our black entrepreneurs, dare I say, our mythological black capitalists, because they weren't capitalists, they're pseudo-capitalists, but whatever. our mythological black capitalists still were ours. They belonged to us. They were ours to deal with, and they were vulnerable to pressures coming from the community. But now if I'm an entrepreneur, I ain't got to go from Oklahoma to Harlem. I ain't restricted to the black beaches. I ain't restricted to the black hotels and the black gourmet restaurants. I'm not restricted to the black car services. I'm not restricted to the black tailor for my fine black clothes. I can take my ass to Dubai. I can go to Italy where they still hate me, but if I got the money, they'll take it. I can go to Milan. I can go to Madison Avenue. I can stay at the Ritz-Carlton, at the top penthouse of the Ritz-Carlton. So we've lost our revolutionary organization. We've even lost our moneyed and capitalist or pseudo-capitalist class. What's left in the black community? We got our churches, which we'll never lose our churches. I tell you all the time, and please quote me on this. White people burning black churches is racism. But black people burning black churches is revolution. Every time I hear about a black church being burned down, I always say, I hope it's a black person that burnt that church. Because when we start burning the damn churches, we know we ready for freedom. But we erecting churches. We ain't burning them. So it ain't time yet, y'all. But anyway, we got the black church. And we know. What did Bobby E. Rice say? When they put us in slavery, they didn't give us good housing. They didn't give us good food. They didn't give us good clothing. They didn't give us good sanitary products. They didn't give us any kind of education. So why the hell did they give us such great religion? The only thing of abundance and quality they ever gave us in slavery was religion. The only thing they let us engage in unobstructed. They even watched us when we worked. Make sure we didn't damage the tools or try to turn the tools to weapons. They watched us in everything we did. But the one thing we got the most freedom to do without an overseer, without somebody standing on our necks, was praise white Jesus. So we got the church. What else is still thriving in the community? The gangs. So since we don't have real revolutionary organizations, we'll just play make-believe. Since we can make believe Jesus is real, we can make believe that the Lord is going to make a way somehow while we're here beneath the cross we bow. We can make believe all of that. So let's just make believe on the other side. Let's make believe that the gangs are potentially revolutionary forces. That the gangs are somehow against the status quo. That the gangs will somehow take up their arms in a time of need and defend the community. Let's just play. We play and make believe on our other institution is based on a lie and make believe. The Bible. So let's have our defensive institution. And one of my problems with this, with believing that God is going to return for salvation, or Allah, or Master Farad Muhammad, it's all in the same delusional box. It's all the same fiction. If we're going to make believe on our salvation, let's make believe on our defense. And it really blows my mind. But what I really find that I got a lot of middle-class black people who've never had to deal face-to-face on the ground with young black men and women who are afflicted by gangs. They're the main ones pushing this narrative. Oh, gangs are a potential revolutionary force. Or gangs are just these wayward black youth who are seeking family and companionship. I'm like, damn. I'm like, why don't you give up your nice condo in this relatively safe neighborhood and go live amongst these wayward youth and teach them the way, the truth, and the light. And not that these are grown-ass men making deliberate, direct positions. And I know, Lord knows, I know plenty of brothers, kids I came up with, kids I used to, build clubhouses and catch snakes and frogs with, that didn't have toothpaste, didn't have running water in their homes. And they started selling drugs to buy Wonder Bread, to put government cheese on and have grilled cheese with Wonder Bread and government cheese, and to make sure their little sisters had sanitary napkins and their little brothers had fresh underwear. I know plenty of black folks who started slanging just to do those things. I saw it with my own damn eyes, but it never remains as that. And everybody that takes that step to buy those products, to meet those deficits and to satisfy their needs. And I'm like, how do you go from clean underwear to a fleet of tricked out cars? How you go from just having a decent shirt on your back to having draped in gold chains? Herringbone was real popular. So even those people who do those activities out of absolute desperation, they get corrupted by that process. You go from trying to address, take extreme measures to address desperate conditions to becoming fully corrupted because you can't stay. And when a lot of those people that step up and say it's starvation or hustling, you talk to them after they've been there. I talk to gang members. The first thing every gang member say, I almost have to fight from rolling my eyes because I hear it so damn much. I want to get out of this, man. I don't want to be like this. I ain't about this. But I can't. I'm in too deep. If they won't come and blow my brains out, they got all kind of dirt on me. The things they made me do, I had to do. I thought I'd just slang a few rocks and get a few dollars. Next thing I know, and this is the kind of stuff that happens with these gangs. And why the young men and women get corrupted. You join and say, it happened to me. I'll tell you my personal story. Because I was living in those conditions. I was raised by my grandmother. Y'all know my story if you listen to my show. For you who don't listen, I was raised by my grandmother in the projects. Dad's incarcerated. Mom's on drugs. All the same old grand American hood story. And I don't want your damn sympathy. I need your understanding. And there was a cat, and I won't say his name, who came and told me and my best friend, yo, I'll give y'all $50 a day to be lookouts for this dope house. And that was an unbelievable amount of money. If I took that job, being a lookout, we didn't call them trap houses. We called them crack houses. We weren't as clever as described at a dope house. They needed somebody to watch the front and the back. The sides were secure. $50 a day. If I took that job, making $50 a day, I would be the highest paid person in my household. I lived in a 3-bedroom subsidized housing project with 2 of my adult uncles. My mother would come and go. My brother, my sister, my grandmother, Uncle Martin. It was a house with half a dozen adults and 4 kids, sometimes 5. Sometimes 6 when other kids would get dropped off. And we were all piled in there. And of all those adults, if I took that job making $50 a day, I'd be the highest paid person in my household. And we could use it. Our cabinets in our bathroom were held together by duct tape. Y'all know how the maintenance crew. In every housing project, they had these maintenance workers that didn't do crap, but put on those dingy ass shirts and sit in the main office and didn't fix nothing. But they were getting paid. Those were the real welfare queens. But anyway, I thought to myself, man, I can't sell drugs to somebody else's mother. Somebody sold drugs to my mother. I know how that made me feel. I'm not doing it. And my homie looked at me and was like, how could you not do this? Well, and it ain't, because this is what happens. And this is what I understood, because my father, even though he was locked up, would write me these long letters. And back then, I don't know about now, because now it's all digital. And the people I know that are incarcerated, they call your house. They don't write. I mean, you just don't get letters in the mail like that anymore. At least I don't. But because they would write sometimes 2 or 3 lines in between the lines. They write in the margin. They write on the front and back. And my dad was running game to me from prison all the time, telling me about how to navigate the streets and how not to end up in the streets. And I would read his letters. But anyway, this is what happens. When these gangs y'all love so much. And y'all want to be so sympathetic to these young men and women. You start slanging. Either you go solo and you start hustling on your own, which is very precarious. You better have crew. But anyway, you join a gang and you start slanging. And one day your crew get together and say, yo, come through. We about to bang some people in. You say, okay, we're going to bang some people in. That's how I got jumped in. And you walk into whatever, a basement, somebody auntie house, the quote unquote trap house. And you look around and everybody there already in the gang. You already know them. Like, who we jumping in? And you look and it's a young woman, 14, 15 years old, and say she want to be down. And so we all gonna bang her in. And how do they bang women into the gang? She's got to sleep with a couple of dozen guys from the crew. They gang raped this girl. And what you started off, damn, I just wanted to do a little hustling to make a little food, and you turn into a damn rapist. And then the spiral goes. And it's just like when a young man joins the U.S. military and decides, hey, I'm going to fight for freedom and democracy, and come home and buy me a car and get me a GI Bill to go to school, and you're overseas committing mass atrocities. It does something to you. So then you got to make a decision. Do I rebel? Do I walk away from this and potentially get killed? Or do I go along with this? And if you start to do atrocities, you have to, your fundamental brain chemistry transform. Even if you don't agree with what you're doing, if you carry out the act, you don't maintain your mind. You literally become a different person. And many of y'all know the gangs, or y'all know the young people not in gangs. I've been there. I've been hand in hand, face to face with young people that make that transition from desperate youth to gangbanger. And it is a scientific process. It is the same process they used to turn a kid, cracking jokes, some douchebag athlete in high school, to a systematic murderer in the military. So you have to make a decision. And I know people who've made the decision. I know people who said, listen, I got in here to make a little money. I got in here so that I didn't have to. I know a young man in Brooklyn. The dude was like, I got 3 sisters, and I'm not a big guy. But because I roll with this crew, because I'm with this group, I know nobody gonna mess with my sisters. I know my sisters get to grow up without being, and if something does happen to my sisters, I know that I'll be in a position to retaliate and to secure justice for my sisters, because I know damn well the police ain't gonna do it. But then here's the trick. If you want your sisters protected, you gotta be willing to violate somebody else's sister, somebody else's mother, somebody else's auntie. That's the trick. And so everybody wants to focus on that. Oh, he just started hustling to get a little money. He just started, doing this noble thing to protect his sister. And everybody else in your hood getting molested and raped, trafficking young girls, pimping hoes. So there is no good positive outcome. And it really sickens me that you safe, comfortable, middle-class Negroes want to come to me and talk about, the gangs. And I know some brothers that was in the streets, some brothers that made it out with their minds intact, brothers that made it out with their bodies intact. I know brothers personally that made it out crippled, psychologically, emotionally broken. And when I articulate these truths, it's never the current or ex-gangbangers that do it. It's always these so-called progressive blacks. We even got Minister Farrakhan out here talking this rhetoric. We got Dead Press out here talking about revolutionary but gangster. You got all these people that have a safe distance from the slaughter, that want to try to rationalize and humanize an inhumane system. So when dude came and told me he was going to give me $50 a day for some minor work, I don't have to touch drugs, you don't have to touch guns, and plus, if you get locked up, you're a minor. You're a juvenile without a record. You can get out on a signature bond. You'll be straight. It's almost a risk-free hustle. And I said, no, and I'm going home. I'm not doing it. I'll just eat the government cheese without the Wonder Bread. But, maybe I was in a better position to say, no, I had a supportive family. As bad as we were, I had uncles, I had aunties, I had cousins that kicked in to help. I had options that other people in my same community didn't have. So I'm not even down on them for doing what they did, but I'm not going to make up fantasies about what they did either. This is something I've been engaged in my whole life. So that is reactionary. The gangs do not present a revolutionary force in our community, potential or actualized. That's not what they have ever been. And they were not a revolutionary force of the past. That is a myth that people are constructing this history, and I don't know why. I think the reason they do it is because the gangs are becoming very powerful. They're getting a lot of money. They have a lot of clout. Black gangster culture is a multi-billion-dollar business. Everything from high-end couture fashion to mainstream corporate media is profiting off of this gangster persona. And so now black people want to start to say, well, hey, the gangster, has got to be something to this. Because there's so much money and there's so much exposure. We're playing ourselves. We're setting ourselves up for catastrophe. And I don't know what I have to do to drive this home. It's truly shocking to me. It is truly shocking to me every time I bring up this phenomenon and the absurdist backlash that I get from people saying all this delusional stuff. Someone just asked me, what about the black gorilla family? We don't have to question about the black gorilla family. The black gorilla family, if you look up the term what a gorilla is, the black gorilla family was supposed to be an armed revolutionary faction like the Black Liberation Army. If you go read Blood in My Eye by George Jackson, the founder of the black gorilla family, they were not formalized as a gang. But unfortunately, like the Nation of Islam, like Malcolm X said, we start a good thing and then the gangsters and the niggas get in it and mess it up. But the Black Guerrilla faction, I will put them with the Black Liberation Army. I will put them with the Black Panther Party for self-defense. The Black Guerrilla family underwent a COINTELPRO operation. And they say we either neutralize or capture. So when you neutralize an individual, you kill them or you turn them. When you capture a person, you incarcerate them or you take control of them. They do that with individuals. They also do that with organizations. So what if that is all reactionary violence? If that is, and then another thing I see, let's get off of gangs for a minute. Let's just talk about these died in the war. Let's talk about these killer cholesterol Mike types who aren't in gangs, who are relatively positive, responsible black men and women, and they all want to own guns. And you got idiotic black people out here talking about doing commercials for the NRA. You got black gun enthusiasts going to the NRA convention, pretending like the NRA got anything to do with black people or that black people that got any sense to go do anything. We got to arm ourselves. There were a lot of black folks in Hurricane Katrina that had guns. Now, I'm a gun owner. I've been a gun owner longer than I've been legally allowed to own a gun. The moment I could legally own a gun, I was happy about that because I wasn't really comfortable about being an illegal gun owner, but I've been a gun owner before I was old enough to legally even own a gun. I still to this day remember the very first gun I ever had. Who gave it to me? I remember where I used to stash it and everything. When I met my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, before she trapped me with them 2 kids. I gotta stop saying it. It's not even funny. When my wife and I were dating, one of the first things we did, I think it was our 3rd date, I took her to the sheriff's department. She still has it. And she went and got her gun registration. And this is New York, 2000. This was for a long gun. And we went to Missouri. We went to a couple of gun shows and a couple of gun shops. And she got herself a girly gun, I think. I think she got the gun because she thought it was cute more so than its usefulness. I wouldn't be with a woman who didn't arm herself and did not know how to, at the very least, load a gun. So whenever I'm out of town, one time I had to go to California for almost 3 months. And I was confident that my wife was straight. She had what she needed in terms of money and her little, revolver. More than enough. So I am not anti-gun ownership, but I am anti-NRA. Dare I say it, Second Amendment. The reason I'm anti-Second Amendment is because it utterly disgusts me to see black people on TV. They keep trotting out these stupid, insane Negroes to get on the damn media talking about my Second Amendment rights. I'm like, Negro, What about the other 9 amendments? Ain't none of your human or civil rights respected. So it's really stupid. Black people, we don't have the freedom of speech. We get severe consequences. They have killed black men who just got up on a podium to tell the truth. We don't have freedom of assembly. Every time we've come together to organize, they have infiltrated. Every single time without. Give me a time where black people have assembled. Even if it's not for revolution. Even if it's for with the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, a nonviolent organization who said we will not fight, we will not raise a hand, we will not throw a rock. We will pray, we will march, and we will obey the laws of the system. Even when we march, we're going to make sure we get the right permits and we stay on the permit route. And any blacks that come to us to talk about take up arms, any black that come to us to talk about violence or anything, we will denounce them and immediately report them to the authorities. How can you be more lawful than the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, headed up by the most peaceful man that ever lived, Martin Luther King? Martin taught me much when he simply tried to love him, brother, all about peace, and the devils had to snuff him. Wise intelligence said. They infiltrated that group. So y'all tell me, give me a right that was respected. There's probably one right, one amendment that's respected. I used to know the Bill of Rights by heart, being a political science. We had to take a constitution, federal and state constitution exam to graduate, and I had to know all this crap. But freedom of assembly, we don't have, what's the other thing? Illegal search and seizures, unlawful detainment. What? Give me a right. Corrosive bail should not be required, or excessive fines imposed, nor cruel, unusual punishment inflicted. Article 8 of the Bill of Rights, the 8th Amendment. So it blows my mind. There's only one amendment that we've had respected, that has never been violated for black people, but every other person too. And that's Article 3, or the 3rd Amendment. No soldier shall, in time of peace, be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, nor in time of war, but in the manner to be prescribed by law. And the reason that the 3rd Amendment, because everybody hollers about the 2nd and 1st Amendment, and the establishment of a church, that's the 1st Amendment. And freedom of speech, then you tell me there ain't no state church? Every time I turn around, I go to the government office, every government employee got a damn cross or some religious symbol. Go to the damn DMV. People, religions everywhere. But anyway, when the United States was a colony, it still is, it's a settler colony. It went from being a traditional colony to being a settler colony. But that's another discussion. But when the U.S. was a colony, the British crown, the evil King George, the tyrant King George, would send over what was called the Redcoats, the imperial forces, to make sure the colonists, George Washington and those other slaving, rapist, murderous colonizers, stayed in check. And even though King George was a horrible colonizer, he had a certain level of consideration that he would give to the native people. And that's one of the things that really pissed off the white colonizers, is that, he's giving all these rights. We want to go take this land, and King George is telling us we can't kill Indians, rape Indians, and take Indian land at the rate we want to. He'll make a treaty, or he'll negotiate some peace with the damn Indians, and then we can't go slaughter, rape, murder like we like to. That was one of the biggest reasons for your American Revolution. They weren't fighting for freedom. They were fighting for more access to murder. I digress. He would send over the Redcoats, the colonial officers, and he didn't want to keep building bases and barracks. So he told the colonial citizens, as a payment for being blessed to be a member of the empire, I'm going to let you're going to have to house a colonial soldier. So the colonial redcoats will come here and take up on, and you had to feed and house this soldier for a set amount of time. And they hated doing that. And then, many of the colonial officers, they just came here to do a tour of duty, like Iraqi soldiers. Like American soldiers in Iraq, they're just here to do a tour of duty. And they go back home, but they got their wife, family, everything at home. But when they're here, they're going to want to have sex. And the mistress of the house would often have to oblige. And you're just a peasant. And he's a soldier with a musket. What you going to do? That white folks, you think they treat each other better than they treat us? I don't know where that myth started, that white folks are so much better to each other than they are to us. That white people are unified where black people don't have unity. But anyway, they hated that so much, they put it in they made it a basic right, civil right. The Third Amendment. You don't have to house a soldier. And I don't know of any black person, past, present, or future, because when this stuff was written, black people didn't even own homes. So you can't house somebody in something you don't own. And by the time the Emancipation Proclamation, Reconstruction, Jim Crow, all that came around, I don't think one black person has ever had the Third Amendment, their Third Amendment civil right, their Third Amendment right violated. Not once. So of all the amendments, all 10 of the what's called the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, the only one that's never been violated was the third. But it hasn't been violated for any American that I'm aware of. If you know of, but everybody, every time I make a claim like this, I don't like making these absolute claims because there's always some nerd listening. Oh no, actually in 1912 there was an instance. Okay, almost never, but I'm going to go on the record as saying our Third Amendment rights have never, ever, ever, ever been violated. But literally, every single other amendment has been absolutely, totally violated. But you got black folks on here who don't have their First Amendment, their Fourth Amendment, Fifth Amendment, Sixth Amendment, Seventh Amendment, Eighth Amendment, Ninth Amendment, and 10th Amendment rights are violated on a daily basis, going on Fox News talking about their Second Amendment rights. And they can't even say, well, I'm glad you brought me on Fox News to talk about the Second Amendment, because anytime you can find a crazy Negro to agree with any of this right-wing propaganda on Fox News, y'all love to drag out your pet Negroes. But let me just say, all the damn amendments are violated. And yeah, I want my second and all the other amendments to be respected. And while we're talking about amendments, let's talk about regulations. And Fox News shouldn't exist, because media monopolies are also in violation of Constitution, and not only Constitution, but also civil and criminal law. All of y'all should be in jail. Bring me on Fox News. I'll lie and say, yeah, I'm coming on there to talk about my Second Amendment. And then black men, these black ammosexuals, these black gun nuts like Killer Cholesterol Mike, but there's plenty of them out there that talk about that, pretend like, what are the guns for? They pretend that we need guns to protect ourselves. I've worked with some black men who have been dealing with gun safety, gun education, gun advocacy in Chicago for more than 40 years. They came out. We used to do this thing called the slingshot shootout, and we would teach guerrilla tactics using paintballs and slingshots. And one of the founders, one of the earliest people that dealt with gun awareness, gun safety, said, I don't want masses of black folks to have guns. I said, why? He said, because they're just going to shoot each other with them. He said, until we get proper political education, most black people are going to get guns to protect their property. But most black people, the majority of guns, deaths in this country are suicide. And if you have a gun in your home, you're more likely to die from the gun, or one of your loved ones are more likely to die from the gun than you going out in a blaze of glory fighting some evil criminals or fighting against government tyranny. That government, we need guns to fight government tyranny thing is also a myth. So it's crazy to me, even though I'm not a gun enthusiast, I don't even like shooting my gun more than necessary, because I don't like the lead powder residue. It's a very unhealthy hobby. To have some, toxic bullets are very toxic. And when you shoot and have that small explosion, it leaves these toxic residues all over your hands. And when I would go to the gun range, you see some people be there with rebreather masks. They'd have on guns and even have on goggles. And other cats be out there in tank tops and shorts and flip-flops shooting, woo, yeehaw. It's highly toxic. Gun ranges are toxic sites. And they have to even regulate for the ventilation systems and stuff because they can't just off gas that stuff. It's a very toxic hobby. Guns are very toxic. And I'm not even getting to the deadliness of shooting them. So I'm not a gun nut. I wish I lived in a world where I didn't need or want a gun. But I'm not dumb enough to be a puppet or a pansy for the Second Amendment. So a lot of these gun nuts, the real reason, they'll tell the community, oh, we want to promote gun rights in the black community so that black people can protect themselves. So I'm like, okay, what do you want to do? I want to preserve black people's lives. Keep black people alive and save black people's lives. So I'm like, really, huh? So could you tell me what the number one killer of black people is? I said, can you tell me the mortality rates? And what is the number one cause of death for a black person? Is it guns? Is it lack of guns? What the hell does that have to do with black folks? And so many of them look at me like I'm crazy. Like, what are you talking about? So anyway, the truth is, black person listening to me right now, the presence or lack of a gun is not likely to be your source of death. And I know you watch action movies and it would be really cool for some of y'all to go out in a blaze of glory. But you're more likely to die from your diet and lack of exercise. So if you're really about saving black people's lives, you would advocate for a plant-based, high-fiber, low-processed food diet and regular intervals of exercise, low-impact exercise, from walking to swimming to aerobics. That would save more black lives than protecting black people's rights to have guns. If you really wanted to preserve black lives, you would fight for black women's reproductive rights, black prenatal care, home birthing, doula, proper nutrition for black mothers. Because another major killer of black women and black children is not some thug kicking in your back door, but the racist, biased health care that black mothers and black infants get, black infants in the womb. So I'm like, is it really about black lives? Because in reality, this black gun culture is no different than the white gun culture. It's about masculinity. It's about manhood. And it's about taking the most reactionary means to fill this void, this hole. Well, I'm a real man. And they've taken these manly, burly men and made us sit in cubicles. We have to sit in classrooms. And we believe we are men of the jungle, men of the forest. So all the vestiges of manhood has been taken away. You know, you used to have lumberjacks, and you used to have farmers, and you used to have railroad workers, and you used to have men of industry, and men would do this manly thing. And it's all been taken away. Agriculture, you're using turbines and other machines and technology. They got machines to cut the trees. They got machines to dig the trenches. They got machines to do everything. There's a few hard hat men out there. But every year, there are fewer and fewer. They're about to start 3D printing bridges. They're about to start 3D printing high-rises and skyscrapers. And even what we do put together, I mean, even you look at the manufacturing, all this manufacturing boom that's going on, this welfare boom, real estate boom that started by Rahm Emanuel here in Chicago. Most of those men, they're just clicking things together. These skyscrapers are like Legos. They already come with all the parts, and they just connect part A to part B, and then connect part C to part B. They're not able to, like, you know, it used to be the craftsmen would be out there chiseling at the stone. So men don't feel like men anymore because we have this absurd concept of what a man is. A man is a conqueror. A man is a builder. A man is a blah, blah, blah. And so one of the last vestiges of manly manhood we have left are the guns. White men and black men. Because if white men are doing it, black men are going to follow. And I hate to say it, but it's true. The white man go farm a Mormon church and even says black people have no souls and that the black skin is a curse from the devil. And black men are like, oh, what we doing? We doing Mormonism? Let's be Mormon. We got black Scientologists. No matter what white people get into, there's going to be a population of blacks that are going to follow white people right off the cliff. You even have black men in the Proud Boys, a racist, nationalist, fascist group. Black men in the Ku Klux Klan opened up membership to blacks. I bet you. It's just, that's the nature of oppression. If you're not existing oppression, that's the nature of the integrationism. It's just the reality. It ain't just us. I'm not putting down black people because if you go to Asia, you'll see white Asian men wearing leather jackets and those greaser pompadours, and they're like white boys of the 1950s. You know, they're like an episode of Grease playing honky-tonk music. You got skinhead gangs in Asia. So the oppressor imposes his culture on the oppressed. The colonizer imposes his culture and contaminates the culture of the colonized. And so people start to mimic their oppressors. They start to mirror their oppressors. And it's even children who are abused start to kind of mimic and mirror their parents because they figure if a person is attacking me, if I can be like them, if they can see themselves in me and I see myself in them, that will reduce the potential of harm. So mimicking your oppressor is not, it's even it's an evolutionary trait. When you have this imbalance of power, those who are powerless start to mimic and try to mirror those in power. So I'm not even faulting. I'm just saying we got to understand this if we're going to solve it. So if white man's going to have him a gun culture, if a white man's going to be an ammo section, you're going to inevitably have some black men say, yeah, you're right. Oh, you take my gun from my cold dying hands. Like your hands ain't dead because, you know, you fought for your gun. Your hands are cold because you got diabetes and your circulation ain't right. You know, you're not managing your diet. That's why your hand is cold. Not because a government agent killed you to take your gun, dummy. So it's really sad that black people get into this gun culture and we don't even come at it from an African-centered or revolutionary radical point of view. We don't even understand armed resistance, revolutionary armed resistance. It's very, very, very sad to me. So I'm not against dealing with this concept of gun violence, gun ownership. But for us to approach guns from a Second Amendment discussion, talking about white folks' laws that they want, even in areas like in Ohio, where they have open carry, where you can legally walk down the street twirling your gun like the Wild Wild West, and they're still shooting black kids who are playing with guns. Because even if the black child actually had a gun, it's legal for people to have guns out in the open. A man wants to buy a toy gun in Walmart. A black man goes to buy a toy sword in Walmart. And he's just walking through the Walmart with a toy gun or a toy sword, and the pigs show up and murder him. So even in the areas where they are pro-gun, your gun rights aren't expected because your problem is not the fact that you don't have guns or have access to guns. Your problem and your issue is that you are under genocidal white racist oppression. And what the hell you look like fighting for gun rights for white people when they killing you with guns and getting away with it? Killer Mike? Killer cholesterol Mike? People say I fat shame Killer Mike. Maybe, I don't know. So this ammo section, it is more reactionary violence. So even if you're a black man, I'm not in a gang, I don't deal drugs, I don't bother nobody, but I'm gonna get me a gun. If somebody come after this little fiat currency white daddy gave me, if somebody come and touch this car the white man sold or manufactured for me, I'm gonna blow their brains out. And you know, there was just an instance of a white man in Illinois. 4 black boys came on his property. And they were messing around his car, and he ran out his front door and shot one of those boys in the head, blew his brains out. And they want to charge the other black boys, it was 5 or 6 in total, and they want to charge the other black boys with the murder. And you know, I thought to myself, damn. And all the legal experts and even all the gun safety experts said what he should have done is if he saw someone messing around his car in the middle of the night, he should have called the police and stayed in the house. And you know, one time, we were living in Kansas City, and I was laying in bed, and the car alarm went off. And I grabbed my gun. My wife actually woke me up. Like, you hear that? And I'm like, oh, is that our car? So I look out the window, and I see the car lights flashing and the alarm going off. So I grab my gun, click, clack, and run downstairs to investigate. Turns out, it's a weird thing. Our dog, I had dropped my keys in the yard, backyard. And the dog we had a doggy door in the back off the kitchen. The dog went outside to use the bathroom overnight. And he saw the keys and started chewing the keys. You know, the keys got that big black plastic nub. He chewed the keys, and that set off the alarm. And I thought to myself, damn, would I be willing to kill somebody? And we were in an all black neighborhood, all black folks, like we live now, most of my life. I'm like, damn, well, I'm going to shoot some black person over this damn car. When the car's insured, I could get another one. You know, it'd be a grand inconvenience, but it ain't worth somebody's life. This is years ago. This is over 10 years ago. So, in that time, I started kind of changing my attitude about my gun, and what was the real purpose of the gun, and what would be an appropriate way and time to use it versus an extremely inappropriate time and place. And so when white folks are talking about whether or not they want to ban bump stocks, when white folks are talking about their Second Amendment, U.S. Constitution, when white folks are on that nonsense, we as African people, we need to have our own independent, isolated discussion that ain't got nothing to do whether they make guns legal or illegal, whether they regulate guns or don't deregulate guns. We are not citizens of the American nation. We are subjects of the American empire, and we need to start thinking and functioning and acting like it. We need to stop having so much invested in what white folks will or won't do or what their agenda is, because it's like Professor William Mackey Grandma said, the bugger got no shame. They'll legalize guns and legalize every gun in the world and then start locking us up for minor code violations or other reasons. So whether they legalize or make guns illegal, black folks, our very existence is illegal. Our very humanity is being violated. To hell with the constitutional amendments. Oh, time's almost up. So even the law-abiding black people, most of our violence, most of our gun advocacy is reactionary. You ain't got to be in gangs to be involved in anti-black or reactionary violence and reactionary advocacy. So I guess we're going to do a part 3 tomorrow. And I'll talk about what real revolutionary violence is, whether it's guns or whatever other actions we can take. But I'm running out of time here. This is Q4 Radio. Please become a Patreon if you can. We're actually starting to lose support and funding. This is something I said. Well, I'm going to keep saying it. So if I'm losing support, then so be it. But I understand, we coming into an economic recession and all of that. I understand people are hard shipped, and I appreciate those who give what they can. Please share, subscribe to YouTube, do all of that. But if the Bro Diallo Show is to continue to broadcast on Q4 Radio, AM 1680, and DialloKenyatta.com, it will be up to you. I'm here for the people, in the interest of the people. And to the extent that the people offer and sustain support, I will be here. I will commit to you if y'all can commit to me. So let's have another musical interlude, and I will see y'all Friday. We're going to have one more installment of reactionary violence versus revolutionary violence, where we're going to talk about what is the appropriate position and stance and approach to violence for black people. When is it appropriate to use violence? How do we prepare, secure ourselves to not just engage in violence, but to secure ourselves from the misuse of violence? And what is revolution? And how does modern day revolution, what will it look like? What form will it take? And what role do guns play in that? Q4 Radio, AM 1680, Bro Diallo Show. This is Human Education Against Lies, the HEAL Project.